Great, so good evening everybody. Hope you're having a really nice day. It's been one of those kind of like patchy, cloudy, kind of rainy, kind of great days, and actually talking about clouds and rain is kind of like quite interesting for the person I am talking to this evening. I've got Michelle Davies from Bristol Water. We were just having a little chat before we went live, just about some of the misconceptions. But first of all, I'm going to ask Michelle just to explain to us what her role is for Bristol Water. So what is it that you do, Michelle?
Hi Becky, good evening everyone. So head of strategy at Bristol Water. So it's one of these roles that's quite difficult to explain. It's a bit of a jack of all role. It's on behalf of the longer term. Have you frozen, Becky?
Yeah, I think I might have frozen. I think that you're in the right place. Hopefully it'll all catch up with itself in a second. But if it gets too unbearable, then let me know.
Okay, just to know whether I've gone. Yes, so I was just saying my focus on behalf of the company is on the longer term. So as a water company, we obviously need to plan way ahead into the future. We need to think about what challenges we might have in the longer term and make sure that we're prepared for those. So part of my role is worrying about what's coming over the horizon in the kind of 10, 15, 20 year time scale. But I'm also responsible for something called our social contract, which I can tell you more about. And that's really about our contribution to local communities and something which the majority of people in Bristol Water are really passionate about. So yeah, I can tell you all more about that later.
Yeah, okay. So, because I think that that's really interesting, and I'm very passionate about communities, and Weston Town Council are very passionate about our community here in Weston-super-Mare. So just talk us through. It rains, and I turn the tap on. What happens in between? That's not too big a question.
Well, one of the well, let's just start with Bristol Water. Just taking a step back, I should have introduced Bristol Water. So we are a water supply company. So we take the water from a source, we treat it, and then we deliver that to your tap. Within our area, that water, once it goes into the sewer, that's the responsibility of Wessex Water, and they take that away and treat it and put it back into the river. So Bristol Water is one of the smaller water companies. We cover an area of about 1,000 square miles. So we cover Bristol, obviously, in an area up to kind of the Cotswolds, across to Bath. We don't supply Bath itself, although we do push some water over the boundary into Bath, and over down to Glastonbury and then across to the River Severn, so obviously picking up Weston-super-Mare. So quite a big patch, 1,000 square miles, as I say. Where do we get our water from? So obviously water comes from rain. We then collect that. We either take it from a river, and that's where the majority of our water comes from, actually from the River Severn. So right in the north of our patch, we get about 50% of our water from the River Severn. So a lot of it comes over the border from Wales. About 40% we take from the Mendip. So the rain that falls on the Mendip Hills, that goes into rivers and groundwater, and then we store that within our reservoirs. So we've got 3 key reservoirs in the Mendips. And then about 10% is from groundwater sources in our region. So that's quite a relatively small part of our supply. So what happens is we abstract water, principally from rivers, store that in our reservoirs, or we take it from groundwater supplies, and we treat it. And actually the water that comes from these sources can be quite variable quality, and it's not safe to drink. So our core role is to make sure that the water that we abstract from the environment, by the time it gets to your tap, is really super safe to drink and also reliable, so that whenever you turn on your tap, it's there. We have in Bristol Water, and in fact in the UK, the highest drinking water standards in the world.
Wow.
So we're very proud of the treatment process that we put the water through to make sure that it's safe. So it's quite a complicated set of processes that water actually goes through, and people don't recognise, the level of work that goes into making your water safe to drink. So I'm not a water quality scientist, so I leave that to some of my colleagues, but I'll talk you through in a very kind of conceptual level what happens. So we take the water, let's say we take it from a river, and we assess the quality of that water. So we look at the pH and we look at how sort of dirty it is. And then we sometimes blend that with other sources to improve the quality. And then we put that through our treatment works. So each works is different depending on the kind of quality issues in each area. But generally, you'll have a kind of set of processes that operate kind of in a linear way. And it could take, several hours for water to work its way through the plant until it goes back into supply. So the first thing we do is we take solids out of the water. So if you can imagine the water running down the rivers, we've got leaves and insects and twigs, all sorts of things floating in it. So the first stage is to get rid of that big stuff. And then we start to get rid of some of the smaller solids. And the way we do that is something called coagulation. So we put some chemicals into the water and we put some air in, and that makes all of this smaller stuff stick together so we can kind of scrape it off the top. So, excuse me. So that's one stage of the treatment. And then once it's gone through that process, generally it goes through a series of really kind of small sand filters. So it takes a long time to trickle through all of these different filters, and that gets out some of the remaining tiny bits of solid. And then we've got water that's not got anything in it that's kind of, visible to the eye, but it could still have bacteria or it could still have chemicals in it. So then we go through a kind of a chemical treatment process to take any of that nasty stuff out. So we put whatever, depending on the treatment process, we put some chemicals in to kind of kill off any nasties. And finally, we put kind of chlorine in to make sure that when it's working its way through the pipes to your home, it stays clean and safe.
Wow, that is quite a process. You kind of don't really think about all of those particles and everything that would be in it, really. You kind of think, rainwater seems so sort of pure, but of course that's not where it's coming from. So that's so interesting.
Yeah, if we could take it straight out the sky, we'd be okay. But it has to come from rivers, or groundwater is generally better quality than rivers. Yeah. But if you wanted to go for a swim in a river, you wouldn't necessarily want to swallow the water, would you?
No, not exactly. No, that was always the thing that you were told not to do, or if you did, drink a can of Coke afterwards, which is an urban myth. I don't think that actually works to kill anything. So in a sense, with that kind of process, how much? I mean, do you know how much of the Earth's water we actually can drink? Because we sort of think, that there's a large percentage. Do you have any ideas? I think at one point
it came up in a quiz the other day. It's a very small amount. I think it's about 20%.
Yeah, I heard it was about 20%, which is a really small amount.
By that. But it's a very small proportion. It's kind of fresh water compared to obviously salt water in the sea. And I guess the thing which people don't really think about, is where it links into our conversation here, is the amount of energy and chemicals it takes to get that water to a point where you can drink it. So although it seems like water is kind of one of nature's resources, it probably doesn't have an environmental impact. Of course, the treatment of that water and then getting it to your home, which could be some distance from the treatment works, and might have to go, up and down a few hills on the way. So we need to pump it to get it to your home. So there is kind of an environmental impact of using water in terms of the energy, but also we're taking that from the environment, which means that there's less in the environment for fish and other sort of, ecology to use.
So it's interesting. I was watching an interview with Sir David Attenborough. So, he's so great. And one of the things that he was saying if he could say anything to children at this time, it would be, don't waste anything. So with that in mind, with water, obviously it's taking energy to make sure that it's safe for us to drink, and the effort to actually get it to us in the first place. And there's only about 20% of the Earth's water that we can actually use. What ways in which can we actually save water in our homes that maybe we don't think of? I mean, you know, I often think, one of the things that, you know, I have a jug that I put under the tap. You know how you run the hot water and it's always cold, and then it's hot, and you want it hot when you're doing the washing up. So I always have a jug, and that jug of water I water my house plants with, you know, or that's the water for the dog. So what other ways are there that maybe we haven't thought of? Because that seems fairly easy and simplistic to me. My mum also does that with the shower head. She puts the shower head in a bucket of water, whereas I don't. I just let it run hot. But what else could we do?
Well, I think the thing is with what we call water efficiency, so that's using water more carefully, is it's not really rocket science. It's all of these little things added together. So there's no kind of silver bullet here. The way to think of it is just to enjoy water but don't waste it. So obviously water is really important, particularly in current times, to wash your hands, to wash your clothes. It's become even more important over the last 9 months or so. But where you can, save, don't let water run down the drain. So if you're brushing your teeth, turn off the tap. If you're having a bath, try and reuse that water. And I like to call this the kind of bucket challenge. I'd like to see every household with a bucket next to their bath, because what you can do is very easily scoop out that water, and you can use that to flush your toilet a couple of times, and that works really well. Or you can use it to water your garden, or your house plants. So that's a really, really simple one. There's some things that you can do kind of to change your fixtures and fittings that really help. So you can change your shower head, it uses less water. You can do the same with your tap. So it feels to you like you're getting the same amount out, but actually there's a mix of air and water. So you're getting the same kind of experience, but you're using less. So there's lots of hints and tips, trying to get that out, to save water. Things like, what we do in our household, and people don't really talk about this, but we don't flush the loo every time we use it. You don't need to. I'm sure there's some expressions that we probably won't share now that you could use there. One of the key uses of water in the home is actually in the bathroom. So the majority of water we use is when we take a shower, and the shower can actually be up to 60 litres of water, depending on how long you're in there. So it's very simple. If you just cut down on the time you're in the shower, maybe put a timer in there so you know how long you're in for. You can very, very easily save water that way, and nobody needs a shower that's more than a few minutes. It's just, some people are taking 10, 20-minute showers. And the other thing to remember is it's not just about being a good egg, but you can actually save money. So not only will you save money on your water bill, if you're metered, but more importantly, you'll save money on your energy bill. So I think there's some stats that have come out recently, and it's about 16% of your energy bill is used for water, so hot water, and that's about £228 a year for the average consumer. So it's big money. If you can cut down on your water usage, you can save money, you can improve the environment, and you can feel like you're being a good egg. So it kind of makes sense, really.
That's a nice thing to do. And we had a question come in from Kat, who's watching. Kat says it's been a really sunny, warm year. How likely is it that there's going to be a drought in the region?
Well, we can never say for sure, but our reservoirs are full. We aren't anticipating any problems. We had quite a wet month after that really dry spell, so we're not anticipating any problems. As a water company, we actually are very resilient to drought, so it would be under very extreme circumstances that you would have to kind of implement restrictions. So the first thing we'd ask people to do is to be more careful. So it would be kind of a big media campaign encouraging people to use less water. And then if we had to, we'd implement a hosepipe ban. We haven't had to do that for a long time, and we hope not to have to do that in the near future. And obviously the most severe restrictions, I think people who are around in the 70s or recall sort of standpipes in the streets, 76 Drought. I don't think that was the case in this region, and certainly are not planning for that ever to be the case again. And that's why we need to be so careful, because we have a growing population. We have people who are on average using more water every year, and we have the same amount of water in the environment. So we have to be really, really careful about how much we use. As a water company, we're doing our bit. We're reducing leakage. We actually have the lowest leakage levels of any water company. So we're doing really, really well from a leakage point of view, and we've made significant savings over the last 10 years or so, and we're going to keep doing that. But kind of we, at the same time, we're asking our customers to do their bit, which is a bit of a strange message for people, I think, because we obviously charge people for the water they use, but at the same time we're asking them to use less. So sometimes people struggle with that kind of apparent conflict or contradiction.
Well, it's a service that you're providing. It's not like you're selling sneakers or, so I think you want the service to work and run well, otherwise people would be moaning at you. So, and that actually takes involvement from us. So yeah, I can see why it's a conflict, but in a sense, I doubt you're making a huge amount of profit. So it's not sort of like a profit orientated sort of service. I don't think, anyway. That's not the impression I've ever been given. Am I wrong in that, or?
You are wrong in that water companies do need to make a profit to satisfy our shareholders. So water companies are private entities. They were kind of national, or well, some water companies were national. Were nationalised back in the 70s, and they were privatised again in the 90s or late 80s. So, but Bristol Water has actually been a private water company since 1846. So next year we'll be celebrating our 175th birthday. And the reason that we need to make a profit is because we need to invest significant sums of money. So if you think about maintaining our network, there's a lot of investment that goes into our kind of 17,000 kilometres of pipe, all of our sources of supply. And so we need to borrow that money. And so we need to kind of pay that back. And that's why we need to make a profit, really.
That makes complete sense. I never knew that. Never even considered that. Yeah, that's
But at the same time, we recognise our role as an essential service provider. So we're not like your standard private company. We actually sit somewhere between private and kind of national companies. So because we are a monopoly supplier, if you're a domestic customer, so you have to purchase your water from Bristol Water, our kind of quid pro quo is that we very much invest in our social purpose and try and do good things in our communities to make sure that the purpose drives the water company and not profit.
Yeah, no, that makes complete sense. I totally understand that. You talked a lot earlier when we were just beginning about kind of forward thinking, planning wise. Obviously, with climate change happening, what's the sort of forward thinking that you have, if you can discuss that? I'm not sure, it might be too big a question.
Well, it is quite a big question, but I'll start with our water resources management plan. So obviously our key concern is to make sure that we can continue to supply water in the long term. So we have a 25-year plan, which makes a prediction of our levels of demand and then levels of supply, and looks at at what point in the future demand is forecast to exceed supply. And luckily for us, that's not a big problem for Bristol Water, or not as big a problem as it is for some of the southeast water companies, which have kind of a huge deficit forecast in the future. We hope to be able to continue to meet demand by reducing leakage further and asking our customers to use less water. So we're in a fortunate position of not having to bring significant new supplies like reservoirs into kind of the short to medium term planning horizon if we can do a good job of using less, because obviously at the same time we've got a growing population in our area that we need to satisfy. So When we're looking at those long-term scenarios, we take into account climate change. So we look at lots of different scenarios for climate change. And we take into account different demand scenarios. So we don't know how much water people will need in the future, particularly from industry. We don't know if the rising trends we've seen in per capita consumption, that's the amount that everybody uses, will continue to rise into the future, or whether we can kind of encourage people to use less. If you think about where we were kind of 50 years ago, nobody had a dishwasher or a washing machine, or you know, they weren't washing their cars in any significant numbers. So times have changed massively over the last 10, 20, 50 years. So we don't really know what's coming in the future, but we do lots and lots of different predictions and then kind of work all those out to figure out what the best way to invest our money is in the short term, so that we're ready for those future scenarios.
Great, thank you so much. We've had a question come in from Councillor Catherine Gibbons, and she's saying, what special measures do you have in place to help those struggling with water bills through this COVID crisis?
Oh, that's a very good question. As a water company, part of our social purpose is very much about looking after what we call vulnerable customers. So those people who either have kind of different needs to our other customers, additional needs. For example, they may need to receive their water bill in a different language, or to receive it in Braille, or you know, there's lots of, they may be a high user of water for dialysis, something like that. So we have a register for those customers, and then we also, as part of that, look after customers who struggle to pay their water bill, so who have what we call affordability issues. And we have a range of options in place to help those customers. So we have something called social tariffs, which are a way of providing customers with a lower bill. So under certain circumstances, customers can apply to go onto those tariffs, and they could get, for example, 20% reduction in their bill. An example of a qualification might be if you are on pension credit, for example. So you just need to ring up our customer service desk and let them know, and then they can get you onto the right tariff. The other thing that we can do is to help customers who are in debt. So we can help you to come up with a payment plan to pay back that debt, or even write some of it off, so that those customers who are really struggling don't need to. So there's lots of things we've got in place, and we look after a great number of customers in that way. We're also looking to identify customers who might not come to us proactively. So we do work with, for example, with food banks, with people like the Citizens Advice Bureau and other stakeholders in our area, to help to find the customers who might be either unaware of our additional services, or might have that might see that there's a stigma attached to coming forward and asking for those. One final thing that we're doing is trying to work with other utility companies, so that if you do have an additional need, you can just tell one of those companies and we all tell each other, so subject to, you know, the customer agreeing to that, so that you don't have to repeat your story to all of your utility providers. So that's something which we're working on. Obviously there are a lot of data restrictions that we're working our way through to make sure that that can happen.
Sounds fantastic, well done. Now we've got a question that's coming from Debbie. Now I'm aware that this is probably a question that's more suited to Wessex Water, but if you don't mind, I'll read it out to you anyway, because you may have some insights on it and be able to explain why it's more Wessex Water. So Debbie says, the sewage pollution by water companies into rivers and oceans continues to be a big factor, resulting in water quality still well below the required environmental standards. Can water companies please up their game to stop this from happening? I guess the question is, how can water companies up their game to stop this from happening? And maybe dividends and bonuses should be not paid if the sewage spills into their areas. Now, I'm aware of the fact that you might want to skip this, and you're very welcome to, but if there's any comment you want to make on that, please do.
I will attempt to make a comment on that, just bearing in mind that Bristol Water is a water-only company, so sewage isn't our sort of key area of expertise. But I will say that it's a very challenging task to reduce all incidents of sewer flooding or pollution into rivers, and it requires a significant investment. And I know water companies are making that investment and have got, you know, significant schemes planned to help to reduce pollution. So if you look at Thames Water, there's a multi-billion-pound investment in the Thames tideway tunnel, which will reduce overflows into rivers. Now, part of the problem is it's where you get kind of combined sewers, so you get the rainwater coming into the sewer along with kind of the stuff that you flush out from your house. So we are seeing even more extreme rainfall events that all collect in our sewers, and the sewage treatment works can't cope. And so what happens is they kind of open a gate and let it straight into the river. Now that happens quite rarely, and every water company, if that does happen, needs to report that to the Environment Agency. And they actually have quite stringent targets in place. I'm not sure if they've got financial penalties associated with those, but I imagine they would have, so that there is actually an impact on profit if companies fail to deliver their targets on pollution.
Great, that's so interesting. Thank you for that. And that's Debbie runs Cleaner Coastlines. And so if any of you want to find Cleaner Coastlines, they do incredible beach cleans things, and all sorts of things going on. Yeah, they're a really good team, and they helped us get our Surfers Against Sewage Less Plastic Award for Weston-super-Mare. So we're all doing good work.
The plastic side of things, because we do a lot of work in that area actually. So Bristol Water is really passionate about plastic reduction, and we work really closely with City to Sea. And we were actually the first company to work with City to Sea and provide some kind of seed funding to them to put the refill campaign in place within Bristol.
You worked with them on Touch the Stick as well, didn't you? Was that because the cotton buds?
That's actually Wessex Water, because that's a sewer issue. But yeah, we support them on that. One of the main things we do is the water fountain. So we've now got 10 water fountains in Bristol, and we're looking to put one in Weston next year. And they save like hundreds of thousands of plastic bottles a year, which obviously is preventing a great number of those entering rivers and then the sea. So we do a lot of work around plastics. We work really closely with City to Sea, and that's one of our key areas of our social purpose, really.
Yes, and so right at the very top, we were talking about social purpose and communities, and you were going to tell us more about all of that, so please do.
Yeah, so Bristol Water has always had a really strong social purpose. So when we were founded all those 174 years ago, we actually, it's quite an interesting story, we beat off a rival bid from a company who wanted to supply water to just the wealthy few within Bristol, and that company was actually fronted by Brunel. And so the idea was to supply water kind of very locally within Bristol, but just to supply the people that could afford to pay for it. But the pioneers who founded Bristol Water came up with a different plan, and their idea was that everybody should have access to clean and safe drinking water, and their ambition was actually to bring it from the Mendips along a gravity feed. So there's quite hilly sort of topography between here and the Mendips, but they managed to go through some hills, build some aqueducts to go kind of over some valleys, and brought that into the city to provide clean and safe drinking water to the whole of the city. And that actually helped to improve public health massively. So cholera went down to the point of sort of near eradication, and it meant that people could afford to work, and the kind of the economy and the well-being of the city was improved. So we always bear that in mind within Bristol Water when we're thinking about our purpose, is those pioneers, why did they set up the company and what was it they're trying to achieve? And so our most kind of recent reflection on that is something called our social contract. So what we have looked at is, what are the key wellbeing challenges which face the city of Bristol, and how can we as a water company contribute to those? So it starts with our social purpose, which is to have a positive impact on the wellbeing of our customers, our colleagues, our community and the environment. And to deliver our social purpose, we've put this framework in place, a social contract, which has currently about 40 initiatives that we're delivering. The key thing is with stakeholders within Bristol and surrounding areas that help us to link into those key wellbeing challenges. So the water fountain's a really key example. We've got a big kind of education programme where we've got mentoring with organisations like Ablaze and West of England mentoring, and so that's kind of playing towards education and social mobility. We do a lot of work around conservation, around climate change and regional strategy, so we're very much tied into the One City plan. That's a big area of work for us. And one particularly exciting project that we've got coming up as part of our social contract is something called Resource West. That's our kind of project name. We're yet to kind of name the baby in an exciting way for consumers, but what that project is working with some of our colleagues in other utilities and also universities and local stakeholders to try and do provide a combined and joined up message on resource efficiency. So rather than your water company coming to you and saying, I'll use less water, and your energy company coming and saying use less energy, and then your waste company coming, so Bristol Waste in this instance saying, oh, use less waste and recycle more, we've all joined together and we're going to do a pilot trial which combines those messages and tests at a very granular level how we can encourage people to use less, as David Attenborough says, waste less. So that's one of the most exciting projects under our social contract. And the really unique thing about it is we, at the end of each year, we ask those stakeholders being involved in our social contract whether we've met their expectations or not. And if we haven't, we need to put more money in out of our profits. There's a kind of a feedback mechanism. It means that we're held true to our word to have a positive impact on society.
That's just fantastic. What a worthwhile thing to be doing. And just to let you know, there's been a huge amount of enthusiasm for the water fountains in Weston that's just kind of coming through on social media. So everyone's like, yeah. So is there anything that we can do to help that along? Petition, get excited, put out virtual bunting?
Yeah, at the moment, we're having to stop and take stock a little bit because the water fountains, you have to touch them to make them come on. So we're actually looking into contactless water fountains ready for our new financial year, which starts in April. And I know a fountain in Weston was top of the list. So I think the wheels should already be in motion, and we'll be in contact with the council. I'm pretty sure we have been already, once we've got that new type of fountain in place so that it's kind of COVID compliant.
That's fantastic. And people are also saying Resource West sounds really exciting. They're really excited about it. So I have one last and final question for you, maybe a bit of a personal one. It's from Councillor Gibbons, and she's saying, in case any young people are watching, can you tell us what qualifications are needed for a career like yours, and what's the best thing about it?
Oh, wow, that's a brilliant question, because the careers in Bristol Water are so varied. Obviously, the STEM subjects are a really good way in, but I think the message, we do career fairs and we go out to schools, and the message is it's not a single route in. So we try to encourage people to apply kind of whether they've been to university or not. We're hoping to put some apprenticeships in place in the near future, and also a work experience programme. For me personally, I've got a geography degree, which seems to be quite common in the water industry. And only today we were reflecting on why this is, because there's no kind of direct link with anything you learn, but I think it's just having that curious mind and be able to assimilate data and challenge, which works quite well within my role, kind of strategic role. But we've got scientists, we've got economists, we've got engineers, we've got obviously people who work in HR and finance. So we've got around 550 people who work for us, primarily based in Bedminster Down, but working all over our patch. So I think the main message I'd like to get out is there's not a single route in. Anybody can find a role that works for them within Bristol Water, and we're working hard on being a diverse and inclusive organisation. So we want to help with social mobility and equality. There are things that are really resonate with people at Bristol Water. So we're trying to be as inclusive as possible.
Fantastic, that's good news. Any last thing you'd like to add, you wish you'd been asked? Now's your time.
I guess I better go back to plugging our water efficiency and make sure that that we've all thought of ways in which we can do that. So turn off your tap when you're brushing the teeth, take shorter showers. Oh, one thing I must mention, or I will be chastised, is water meters. So currently we've got about 60% of our customers who are water metered. And the way that we can meter people is you can either apply for a water meter, or if you move house, then we can then install one for people that have moved. Now, you can find out whether you'll save money before you ask for a water meter to be installed. So we're happy to help with that. But really, it's a really good way to save money, and it's the fairest way to pay for water. And it means we can have really accurate measurements of how much water people use as well. So that's a key message. Please think about a water meter. It's a really good thing to do. Then it's the normal things like get a water butt in your garden. Just be really careful about the amount of water you use. Just think about what you're doing while you're doing it. You go into autopilot, don't you? You kind of run the tap when you're brushing your teeth. You let the water down the sink while you're letting it run cold. There's loads and loads of things you can do if you think about it. Put a jug of water in the fridge so you don't have to run your tap. There's lots of information on our website. There's loads of blogs about our social contract and loads of stuff on water efficiency. So start exploring, I'd say.
Michelle, you have been absolutely brilliant. It's such a delight to speak to you. I know I've learned some things. There's some things I was taking for granted that now I'm thinking about slightly differently. So keep up the good work, and thank you very much for joining us. Really appreciate it. This has been part of our initiative as Weston-super-Mare Town Council to really look at climate change and to reach climate change objectives. So thank you so much for the information. It's been really, really helpful, and we look forward to our water fountain. Really excited about that. Thank you again.
Thanks, Becky. It's been a pleasure.